Good to go.
Okie dokes. Hi Thijs, how are you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing good as well.
Nice.
I'm
Nice.
looking forward to today's conversation
hmm
and we'll be focusing on change management. So, just to begin, can you tell me what is change management?
Yeah, change management is a pretty big term, but bluntly put, um, you know, change management basically is helping organizations deal with the changes that they would like to implement, either within their team or their full organization, in a way that's structured and in a way that helps people to accept and embrace that change, more easily. And it's for lots of organizations they want to see this as a structured process, and it kind of is, or it can be, right? But for people individually, lots of times it's actually difficult to embrace that change without question.
Yeah,
So, and that's something that I help people with, both individually but also organizations, but more in the form of training, right? I'm not a change management consultant, but I am somebody who is training people and organizations to help people see the structure in it, and to help them overcome it. Yeah.
okay.
And change is really important these days. I mean, we've never lived in a time that was more disruptive and changing than we live in now. You know.
Yeah,
So I mean, everybody is big on AI. Since last year, of course, when ChatGPT was launched. But we've been bombarded with increasing amounts of information before AI was already there, right? Or before AI was actually fully available to everyone. And there was a really interesting book already written in 1982 by a gentleman called Buckminster Fuller, and he basically said that information has doubled since the 1900s. And well, he's kind of right, but actually he's a little bit behind, because
yeah,
information has doubled since 1900, and then in 1950 it doubled again, and then in 1975 it doubled again, and then in 1982 it doubled again, right? And as you can see, there is an increasing amount and an increasing, you know, like speed in which information doubles
yeah.
every time. And at this point, it's basically estimated that every 18 months information doubles.
I see.
But according to some others, it's actually exponential, which means that information might actually double at this point at a rate of like once a month or so, and
Yeah,
at some states they'll go to like once a day. So what does that bring? The amount of information brings, one, too many things to deal with, and two, changes that need to be implemented quickly and wholeheartedly.
mm,
And that's a very big demand on people, and for lots of people it's actually impossible to keep up with.
yeah,
So yeah, that's why, especially now, change management is something that's really important to to help facilitate, because
right.
it's such an integral part now of what we live in.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
Hmm.
it sounds like change. Yeah, like you say, it's very volatile and it's just happening so often nowadays. It's almost impossible to quantify.
Yeah.
Um, so how then do you actually do something like change management? In if change is so confusing and rapid, what does the change management process look like to begin with?
Yeah. So when you look at, no, so let's start with people, right? So the amount of information is there, but the way that we internally as people deal with change is usually the same. Yeah.
Yeah,
And there was some pretty interesting research done by by people who worked, for example, in the healthcare industry, and they had to give people very bad news, And
yeah,
one of the key researchers there was Kubler-Ross, and that model, the Kubler-Ross shape of change, essentially tells us that when change is announced, we go through a couple of phases. And the first one is shock. We're shocked about the news that we got, and then from there, there's denial. No, this is not happening, right?
Yeah.
It's impossible. And from there, we went into frustration, like a certain type of anger or frustration about, that change that's happened, and anger about the focus that all of a sudden now we need to have in this new reality that we live in.
Yeah.
And that actually causes the way all to go down into a depression, so it makes us feel like in a very low mood and very terrible.
Yeah.
But then from there on, what we start to do is experiment, so when we get to the bottom of the depression, then we start experimenting with that particular change. Like, hey, what is possible? What can I do? How can I work certain days, etc.
Yeah.
And then from there, we make a decision. That's our next step. So then from there, we make a decision to implement that change. And then from there, the change is integrated. And that's the last part of that Kubler-Ross curve of change, where the integration then shows like, okay, I've now fully embraced the change, and I'm actually also very work capable to live with it and to work with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what a person goes through. But people need to learn that for themselves. Like, hey, what does that look like as I go through change? What is that shock for me? How long does it take? What's that denial thing? What do I do?
Mm.
Yeah. And for organizations, this is important too, that they understand that people go through this.
Right.
Because it means that they need to announce things in time. They need to communicate really effectively about it. They need to get people on board, and recognize the people who easily overcome or even maybe encourage that change. To put them together, to build a plan for them, to create a vision for them, and then to help to make sure that they are the sponsors who implement that particular change, inside the organization. And that's basically what organizations then do. So there needs to be a recognition of what people go through in times of change, but there also needs to be a recognition within organizations that when changes are announced, that it's done in the right way, but also that you put a team together in a way that works, that allows them to facilitate that change more easily and helps people internally to overcome whatever challenges there are towards that change.
Yeah.
So so those are the two elements, right? The people and the organization. Yeah.
Okay. So depending on who whether you're dealing with people or an organization at wide, then the change management process itself will change. Mm-hmm. It's a different process.
Yeah. Yeah. So well, actually, the two processes are integrated, because the one process where you implement it in organizations, they make use of those or at least showcase the understanding of the changes that people go through when changes are announced, right? And how people deal with that as a group. And a good change management process allows people to facilitate, the personal changes that they go through, so people cope more easily, or you provide people with mechanisms to cope easier.
Okay. In that case, so it sounds like change management, it helps, especially in this volatile situation where there is so much change. Are there any other benefits that you can speak of a change management course?
Well, I would say that the key thing, when I do a course for change management, I would say the key benefit is for people to help to learn, accept change, right? Mm. But of course also for managers to understand the right steps in order to facilitate their team or company through these times of change. Yeah. So when I do a change management course, I help people to come to terms with the change, and I also help them to see what kind of challenges that change will bring for them. Yeah. And I help people then to understand specifically, hey, but what does that change mean for me? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what kind of a person am I? Am I actually personally somebody who easily accepts change and embraces it or not, right? And then when you will have a better understanding of that, then you can take people through that Kubler-Ross curve of change, so they understand what phases they go through. But then what I do for managers typically is to help them, how do I help people in my team? By having coaching conversations, by asking the right questions, by providing them platforms in which they can share their frustrations, and to provide them with ideas, how to overcome it. So, and that's not just for managers, by the way, that's also for people. So then I also provide people with tools in order to help them look at change more effectively and help them overcome it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, teaching people how to learn, how to accept change, understanding the challenges of change,
Yeah.
and also teaching people how to help others overcome change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. I mean, individually it's great that you understand what changes you go through and how to deal with it. But it's also so helpful to be able to help your team members with it, to help your colleagues with it.
Right.
And I think that should also be a necessary step of like dealing with the change. That you make it something that, hey, you're not all alone. You can actually do this together.
Yeah. Is this something then that you, in order to understand how you deal with change, you actually just have to go through an event that changes you? Or is this something, like you say, you can look, if you speak to someone, you can talk to them about, you will go through shock, denial, frustration, etc. And you can sort of preempt them to have a better reaction to change?
No, I would say it's both.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you can explain to people how it works in theory, yeah, they can then start to think about a situation that they've gone through in times of change and see, hey, do I recognize those phases for myself? You know, that's one. But then the second one is like when changes are announced, that people then start to reflect that to that Kubler-Ross curve of change, and through that to more effectively deal with that change that they are going through, right? Because then they can kind of like preempt, oh, this is what's going to be happening to me, right?
Yeah.
As the changes happen. Yeah.
Okay. So it's important to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's most important. Okay. Moving on, can you tell me some effective change management strategies?
Yeah, so especially when it comes to companies, there's a number of, there's quite a bit of research that has been done on dealing with change and for example, doing things like a fusion of two corporations or things like that. Because that's definitely what change management brings. But when you look at quite a bit of the studies, probably the most famous one is from Kotter. Kotter set up a whole number of change management strategies, and he basically refined that into an 8-step process. So essentially, he talks about create a sense of urgency, so showcase to people, hey, change is happening, but we got to implement it now, and that urgency then helps people to also embrace it faster. Right? Then build a guiding coalition. So again, build a team of people that is actually enthusiastic about the change and wants to lead it. Then form a strategic vision and initiatives. So from there you got to know, well, if I got a group of people who want to sponsor this and spearhead it, what should they do? So for that you need a vision and you need an idea how to implement it. And then you need to enlist that group of volunteers. So you need to recognize the people, but then you need to enlist them and bring them on board. And then enable action by removing barriers. So people need to be able to move to implement those changes. Generate short-term wins so people can see that they've been effective. And also, when it comes to change, it basically, you can compare it with when you try and push a big locomotive, right? That's basically the change, because the change that you're trying to push within an organization is like, okay, it's very heavy, it's a lot of hard work. So once you can actually get that locomotive to move, it's a lot of focus and force to get the locomotive to move. But once it runs by itself, because it's so heavy. Yeah, so because of that, you can then sustain the acceleration, which means you do the big push to make sure the thing runs, and then you sustain acceleration by small projects, small additions, to make sure that you give a little shove to that locomotive continuously. So it'll allow the movement and the change to keep going. Yeah. And that's how you then institute the change. That's how it becomes the normal thing. So that's how it works. And the step process can actually be started by leadership positions, but the trick is always for leaders to allow the changes to happen and to give people the sense, basically, of choice and influence. Yeah, because that's what you need. If you push a change on people, but you don't give them any influence, then at some stage people are gonna detach themselves from the process and feel like, okay, I can't influence it anyway, so why bother to be involved, right? And when people actually give up, their engagements to work stops or lessens a lot, and this decreases the quality, might even mean that people leave, it increases the amount of mistakes you can make and all these kind of things. So basically, the 8-step process I have described helps people also to stay involved, but also to stay to keep giving them the feeling that they're actually influencing it and that they can put their own influence into it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's interesting about people need the influence as well.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking a lot of people don't actually like change. They like to, they like whatever is going on to just be the way it is. So you need to push people, or you cannot push people to change without their influence. You have to make sure that they have a say in what is going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and a little bit of pushing, especially when organizations change, is always needed because, whether you like it or not, the change is then happening. But the way then that you support it as an organization, that is something where you can, instead of like telling people this is what's going to change, instead of that, you can also say, hey, I'm going to involve you. So the change that we're going to go through is something that you can actually influence in the way that you do your day-to-day job.
Yeah.
So let's make sure that we combine the two. Yeah, and the best organizations that deal with changes are able to combine the two.
Right.
Yeah, so combine the change that they're pushing and implement the influence that people individually have in order to help that change to happen, but on their own terms or to some extent on their own terms.
Right. So will you say then the reaction, whether it's positive or negative, that people have towards change depends then on whether the company is able to combine the pushing with allowing the people to have some sort of influence? Then it's a positive influence. Then it's a positive change.
Yeah, exactly. Again, once you have influenced yourself on the changes that are happening, then it's also easier for you to implement it. And sometimes people are actually then encouraged to do the change because they say, now I can make something different in a way that I would like it. I can actually rebuild something in my own environment, in which this change is supported, but also where I can do the things now in a way that I would like. And if you give people that freedom as a company, you'll see that they shine, because then you'll see that they're going to be like, hey, I'm actually happy to embrace this because I can carve out the way that I do stuff. Right? But not everybody is capable of doing that, and that's why you need to recognize the people who are happy to be the leaders of that, and then to help them see help them to get their colleagues to see these possibilities that are being created. Okay. So
Are change management courses, are they also done one-on-one, or is this more of a group setting? Does it depend on the actual change and whether it's for people or the company then? Or?
Well, actually what I've done is I've done both. So I've done courses in change management, but I've also combined these with coaching sessions where I help individuals deal with that change. Because with that, I help people with coping strategies individually. Right? So for that, I do coaching as well on a one-to-one basis.
Okay, great. The last question from me, I want to move towards change management courses in Southeast Asia. And I'm curious to know, is change management needed for companies here?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, in times of change, the environment changes, and we're in an environment that changes quite rapidly and pretty much on a continuous basis.
Yeah.
Southeast Asia is definitely special because there is so much happening here, and even more than typically in economies like Europe or the United States.
Mhm.
So because of that, there's a lot expected, from the Asian markets, where it comes to the change and the way to embrace things.
Yeah.
And as a result, people need to learn a lot of things in here in Vietnam, but also in other parts of Southeast Asia, right? We've talked about Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, right? Where a lot of these changes are also happening because of economic changes, but also, because of, for example, the shifting of manufacturing, for example, more to Vietnam and Indonesia and places like that. So that brings with it a lot of new economy, but also a lot of necessity to implement best practices in order to get all these facilities set up here, and then through that a service industry that supports all that professionally and effectively. So again, a lot of need for change, and I would say a lot of need for change in Southeast Asia, even more than other parts of the world. So here it's very much necessary. Now, a great thing about a lot of the culture, for example in China, but also in Vietnam, is that people tend to be very flexible in terms
Right.
of picking things up and doing things. But what usually lacks is structure, and that's usually where the trains that I run are helping to embrace the flexibility that many people have, but then to also bring with it a sense of structure and how to structure things in times of change, so it becomes easier for organizations and individuals who embrace the changes.
Yeah.
So in other words, making best use of great cultural traits that you have here in Southeast Asia, and combine them with best practices around embracing change in organizations.
Okay. So yeah, because there's so much happening in Southeast Asia, and there's so much that people need to learn, change management is very valuable in a place like this. And it also comes with its benefit because of the fact that people are quite flexible here, but it just needs to have a bit more structure, and that will make change a bit more easier to implement.
No.
Those were all of my questions, unless you had anything you wanted to add.
No, that's it for now, I would say. Great topic, that change management. So
Yeah.
thank you, Liam.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Thijs.
Cool. Cheers.